Alright, so here we are with another sculpting video, and this time I'm going to make an Ammonite. That's what it is. Which is like a prehistoric mollusk thing, similar to like a nautilus. So you can see I started out with a curve and then I converted it to a mesh. I'm just using the skin modifier with proportional editing to try to get the shape of the shell right. And this is one of the few sculpts that I didn't use a reference for or anything. I just had kind of a vague idea in my mind and just tried to do my best to, you know, get it out of my head, basically. So here I'm just adding in a circle, and I just gave it 8 points, so it's an octagon. And again with the skin modifier, which I like to use for a lot of character work. And I'm just using this to start off the tentacles. And most squids and some other like cephalopods have like 8 main tentacles and then 2 more that are longer. So I gave this one, you know, basically like 8 legs and then 2 arms, trying to kind of anthropomorphize this one. So there's a lot of fiddling involved just to try to get, you know, a good result that looks natural, especially when you use the skin modifier. You have to be careful, you know, how close the points are to each other and how big you're scaling them. Sometimes they clip and give weird errors, but they can produce pretty good results and it's really easy to use. So I did a little tutorial a while back about making characters with skin modifier, so you can check that out. I'll put a little link right here. So you can see I'm adding a sphere now for the body and just lining the eyes up. Eventually I do remesh all of this to make it a little easier to sculpt with. I think it's funny, this tentacle sitting in the front kind of looks like a Squidward nose or something like that. I end up getting rid of it though. I feel like it just didn't really fit the style of the character that I was going for. So you can see I just kind of squashed some UV spheres for the eyes. I tend to use UV spheres for the eyes and either icospheres or round cubes for other spheres. So here I'm trying to remesh the legs now, or the tentacles rather. But you can see there are some weird clipping errors. Looks like I fixed them now. So I decided to leave the tentacles kind of stubby and then complete them while sculpting. So you can see I just used some proportional editing to make them a little skinnier at the bottom. Then I merged all the meshes together and I'm just going over and trying to smooth them. I believe I do really like cephalopods as animals. So, you know, like octopuses and squids and like cuttlefish and things like that. Apparently they're really smart, you know, can like solve puzzles and, you know, basic problem solving, stuff like that. But I believe they tend to not live very long. You know, only like maybe 5 years or something like that, which is interesting. So here I'm actually adding like a custom fall off to try to make sculpting suction cups a little easier. So I'm just messing with the curve and just testing over and over again until I get a good shape. One thing that's kind of weird about doing something like this is when you zoom in and out, your brush kind of scales with you to stay the same shape, you know, from your perspective. So if you zoom out really far, the suction cups get a lot bigger. So you have to make sure you're not zooming in and out too much. This was a lot of fun though to do, just kind of like stamping them on. I think at this point, you know, in my character sculpting practice, I was getting more comfortable and there was a lot less trial and error. You know, obviously still quite a bit, but I think this one I did a decent amount of base sculpting, just poly modeling, and I think it helped a lot. I think I did like the right amount so that all of the complex details I just left up to sculpting. And I felt a lot more comfortable with this one compared to the other ones. Once again, this was back in October, so all of these have been recorded for like a few months, and I'm just getting around to, you know, doing a tutorial, or rather a video about them now. And so right here, I'm just going through and trying to make the tentacles merge a little more seamlessly into the body, by just kind of building up the area above so it doesn't look as, you know, obvious that the body is just a ball. And I decided to not give this little squid guy a beak or anything like that. I figured you wouldn't really see it much anyway, so I didn't bother. Most squids have a beak, but this is an Ammonite anyway, so I couldn't find too much info as far as like anatomy goes, since they're extinct. There are pretty much just fossils of them, and then you know, artistic like renderings of them. So here I'm just sculpting on the shell now. You can see I made some lines that were all you know, I tried to make them all point towards the center to get like a good spiral going. And now I'm just going through and, you know, kind of bulking up the centers of each of those segments to try to make them a little more round and poofy looking, like the Michelin Man, or like one of those poofy winter jackets. And here I'm just kind of making a ridge around the shell just so it doesn't look completely flat on the bottom. And I was thinking about, you know, maybe sculpting some detail on the shell too to make it look more crusty looking. I do end up adding some detail like that, but I do it all with shaders and the shader editor. I am happy with how this one came out. It was a lot of fun to work on. So for the eye, I was originally referencing like a nautilus eyeball, which is kind of like a circle in the middle with like a line going down. And, you know, obviously since ammonites are extinct, we don't really know what their eyes look like. They probably were similar to like a nautilus or maybe like a squid or something like that. I ended up going with kind of like a more stylized like octopus eye shape, where they are sideways like that, and they have kind of like an upside down U shape. So here I'm, you know, hopping into the shader editor quickly, just to you know, work on the eye, and also I'm using vertex colors, dirty vertex colors, to kind of add like a dirty map. You could probably achieve something like this with the ambient occlusion node. Or maybe the pointiness node. I know pointiness only works in cycles. Ambient occlusion, I believe, works in cycles and EV, so I think that would be fine for this. Vertex colors just work, you know, across the board, but you do have a limited resolution. It's based on how dense your mesh is. So right here you can see it's pretty fuzzy around the edges. You could definitely get a better result if you like UV unwrap and then paint, you know, because you can kind of make whatever resolution texture you want for something like that. But I know for these sculpts, I tended to use vertex colors a lot for coloring because I found it a lot easier. It definitely saves time, but you have to, you know, be careful because the resolution issue can be kind of problematic. If you were going to animate this, I would probably just UV unwrap it. It definitely takes a little more time, but you'll get a better result and you'll get a better deformation. So here I'm trying to add like a slight glow to the eyes. Basically like a little gradient, so they're like yellower around the edges. And then here I'm just adding a little texture to the eyes too, so they're not just completely flat. Kind of like the way it came out. This ends up being a pretty detailed character as far as the texturing and, you know, in the shader editor I put a lot of texture into it. So the eyes look a little more like detailed than the rest of the body, but the other parts definitely get, you know, pretty detailed. Right here I'm just using a Voronoi to kind of achieve, like, I was going for like kind of a scaly look, but I didn't really want it to look like scales, just kind of like almost like dry skin or something like that. I thought it would be a neat texture. And then I think I'm using the smooth minimum right here. And it's hard to explain what that does. It kind of like takes all the intersecting points and smooths them off a little. So you can see it's still geometric, but it is a little smoother where all of those cells meet each other. And now I'm just plugging that into the factor of a mix RGB and using that as kind of like a color mask. So I'm deciding what color I want the scales to be right here. I was originally going for kind of a red look. I think by the end it ends up being more purpley. Once again, I'm messing with the dirty vertex colors right here, just plugging it into a color ramp. Or not a color ramp, but a map range node, which does a pretty similar thing in this instance. I'm pretty much using the dirty vertex colors to add some darkness in key areas, mostly by the suction cups. I think the suction cups are kind of important detail, so I didn't want to make them not have enough focus, you know? And I think the dirty vertex color mask kind of helps that. So here I'm just, you know, coming in, setting up a few planes to try to get some basic lighting. Once you do this, it makes setting up bump maps a little easier, because you can kind of tailor them to what, you know, the lighting in your scene is going to be like. So this one was supposed to be underwater. Obviously it's like an underwater sea creature, so I did make the lighting like blue and green, kind of going for seawater. It kind of gives it like a creepy look too. which I thought was neat. Here for the shell, I'm messing around with bump mapping, and I'm actually using the magic texture, which doesn't get used a whole lot, but I think works pretty good for things like this. And then I was trying to make the texture get smaller as the shell gets smaller. And so I'm using like a length node, which is a vector math node set to length, and using that for distortion. So I ended up getting it to work right here. You can see it's a little more, all of the cells, the texturing is smaller as the shell spirals inward. I think this was a pretty cool result. I do end up, you can see it crashed right there, and that's because I decided to do micro displacement. And yeah, my computer crashes a few times right here, but I think it's giving a pretty cool result when you know, shader displacement is turned on. And you know, sculpting something like this would take me quite a while, especially with all the trial and error right here, because I can kind of you know, change it up on the fly really quickly. So what I decided to do was use the shader displacement for the large bumps, and then for the smaller bumps I end up plugging into a bump node right here, so those aren't actually being displaced, all like the fine detail, pretty much just the big chunky bits. And then once again, I'm using the dirty vertex colors as a mask to try to make it a little more darker toward the crevices in the shell. You'll see I do that in a second. Here I'm trying to come up with some color. Again, I am going for more of like a red right here. Eventually I settle on like a green with some dark blue accents. And I think that ends up looking pretty good. Just getting a little closer to the colors that I settled on. This is the part where I'm using the dirty vertex colors to accent the creases in between those segments. Once again, this is probably something you could use the like ambient occlusion node for. I don't know how well, you know, it would compare, but you could probably get something similar. So here I add some volumetrics to the scene, and you know, as soon as I do that, it makes it look more like it's underwater. It really doesn't take much. It doesn't even have to be like high quality volumetrics when it's just, you know, there's no texture, it's just solid right there. You definitely lose some sharpness, but I think volumetrics add a lot of realism. Here you can see I'm just messing around with the lighting quite a bit. I wanted there to be like significant backlighting, like a rim light, to highlight the shape of the shell. And I was kind of going for more of like a sci-fi, like dark and creepy vibe right here with the lighting. You can see it's pretty dark, with just like accent lights. A lot of people would see this and say that it's kind of Lovecraftian, probably. You have to be careful with placing lights when you have a lot of volumetrics, because you know, if the camera is pointing at one, you'll see a little like glow from it. So you don't want it to be like right in camera view, because it might look a little weird, steal focus away from, you know, the main shot. Here I'm just going through and placing a bunch of spheres. I'm using these for bubbles. The main texturing and sculpting of my character at this point is done, and I'm just trying to use these to spice up the scene a little. Here the shading is pretty simple. I pretty much just take the sphere and make it add some transparency to it. I do add a solidify to it to try to mimic a bubble shape. I think I end up getting rid of that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Here's the final render right here. If you'd like to see more of my sculpting videos, I have a playlist here, as well as a playlist for my tutorials. It's not really related to sculpting, but don't forget to check out my Gumroad shop to get my new barbed wire pack too. Links are always in the description. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.